you going about bringing in these, I don't want to say sharks, but these investors? What is your process like to connect the investors with the people?
Well, I start with being bold, having the audacity to say that I want it, and to recognize a statistic and use that statistic to get people rallied and passionate about the thing that I'm passionate about, which is supporting women in business. And so I know that the US government offers all of these different opportunities, especially with government contracting and with investing and all these things. My background, my education is actually in government. I have my master's degrees in public administration. So I have all this knowledge about how the government and how financial institutions are structured within a community. And it just sits in my brain. And one day I said, I need to make sure that more business owners, minority business owners, understand that literally the government spends trillions of dollars every single year. When they're on the news fighting about the budget, that's the money that they're talking about. The US government doesn't make anything. They don't make anything. They don't provide any service. They hire small businesses to execute every single thing that they need, from cutting the lawn to security to building bombs or guns. There's a small business somewhere that gets paid to do those things. That's the foundation of our community as a whole. And us people of color are not participating in that because historically we weren't meant to. And then secondly, who's taking the time to share that? So Flourish Media created the free government contracting guide, which is 100% free. And what we did, and something that you already said, is that when I learn something, I share it. I share it immediately. Flourish Media is a minority-owned business. It's a women-owned business. We're located in a hub zone. Every single one of those classifications that I just said offers a leverage with the government to get a contract. It's all money. And so when it comes to going after those opportunities, you have to be registered. And since 1970 or so, the government has tried to spend money with small business. So that means if your business has less than a certain number of employees, then you qualify as a small business. Almost 80% of businesses in the United States are small businesses. And that means that 23% of those trillions of dollars are set aside to spend with small business. But look at this, catch it, find out where the money resides. 5% of that is set aside even more so for minority businesses. Even more so, if 2 minority businesses go after a government contract that's under $3 million, they are obligated to give that contract to those 2 minority businesses. That's powerful.
For someone listening who may have a nonprofit, they may have a for-profit and they're going after grants or they're doing pitch competitions. What are some tips or tricks or tools that you can share for how they can position themselves to be able to qualify for some of that funding?
Okay, so first things first is just to have something that you're super passionate about and that you're willing to share and talk about on an ongoing basis. The second thing is to check your resources. Sometimes you yourself have the resources to put in, and I don't mean money. So a lot of it is time, because it is time that you're giving toward this organization, and time reaching out to family foundations on LinkedIn, or you can Google them. There's a lot of different search engines. My mind is going to a blank right now, but I believe it's called Nonprofit Star Navigator, I believe is the name of it. I might be wrong, but you can literally Google family foundations on Google, and there's a network that lists all the family foundations. And the reason why I like family foundations is because they understand that you are probably a small administrative team, and they're not going to ask you for a lot of reporting or anything like that. They just want to know, what is it that you want to do with this money? And the beautiful thing about those systems that I mentioned that you can Google is that they tell you, because every family foundation and nonprofit, they're obligated to report their spending. So those platforms tell you how much that family foundation has spent in the previous tax year. And it also tells you what they spend money on. So that's why you start with your mission. So I want to help women in business. I'm very passionate about entrepreneurship. So when I use those kind of systems, I look for organizations and family foundations that spend money in that place. But then I go one step further and I look for people who spend money in Florida. So that's something that anybody can do and everyone has the opportunity to do, because you always have time or money, right? So when I say time, I say taking the time to look on Google, to look at those family foundations, to look up major corporations who may align with your mission, who are already spending money in that space, because you don't want to convince them to do something different. You just want them to consider you as a part of that reach.
So I definitely want to get into this government contracting, because from what I can tell, and we've talked about this offline, so I got to get my stuff together when it comes to the government contracting. But one of the things that I do know is this is a way that other communities are building generational wealth. Like, they are getting these contracts and they're keeping these contracts, and they are passing them down. They're putting their people in position to be able to assume these contracts. And we don't even know that it's possible. The fact that you mentioned cutting the grass, the cleaning services. I saw on one of the databases where you can search, girl, I've been doing all of the things except getting contracts myself, okay? But on one of the databases, I saw like hairstyling services, something that we would never imagine that you can get a contract for, let alone get a contract from the government. So I first want to just have you talk about some of maybe the most unexpected, like, industries or contracts that you've seen available, just to give somebody like an aha moment that they qualify to.
Okay, so the two really unexpected government contracts. Number one is wigs, honey. Wigs. Okay. If you're home making wigs, and I know that you just heard that, you said, "Excuse me, Vivian, what did you just say?" Yes, wigs. You know why? Because the government takes care of human beings, and anything that human beings need, the government on some level has to supply it. And we have veterans, we have soldiers, we have people of all different walks of life who the government are responsible for, and they supply them with wigs. And like I said before, the government doesn't make anything. The government doesn't provide any services. They have to hire a small business to provide these things. So wigs is my first one. My second one is kitty litter. I am very well aware of a woman business owner who actually was able to close a $4 million contract with the U.S. government for kitty litter. And you may think, well, what? Why? Huh? Well, the government needed to purchase kitty litter because kitty litter is used for mechanical and for cars when they're stuck in the road, in the mud, in the snow, because it gives traction. So the U.S. government, I was missing the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense purchased $4 million worth of kitty litter from this small business owner, and it completely changed her life. One of the
Wow.
Sign me up.
Mm-hmm. Right. I can find some kitty litter. No, you can finish your thought. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No problem. So one of the things that I think that we all need to think about is, how would your business be different? How would you behave differently as a CEO, as a business owner, if you knew you had a contract for multiple years, by the way, because the government likes to do things by the year. So they might do a contract with you this year, then they're going to do a contract for about 3 years, then they do contracts for 5 years, and then they do contracts for 10 years. So what our queen just said about, yes, these contracts are passed down is very true, but there's always opportunity for you to get in the door. You'd be shocked how many contracts just sit there and they go to the same person, not because that person's doing an exceptional job, not because they're, the scene or the go-to, the expert or anything like that. A lot of times these contracts go back to the same person because nobody else applied.
Because we don't know. We're literally playing ourselves because we don't even know that these opportunities are out there. I know that that is mind blowing for somebody. We're going to make sure that we link your free guide down below so that they can get access to that. I do want to ask you though, what is something that you think people need to know in order to get into the space? Because obviously we've talked about, certifications as being part of the process, or, helpful in positioning yourself for these contracts. But if you could just share something that people should know now or could be prepared for, what is one thing that people should do now if this is something that they're interested in?
So if you want to pursue government contracts when it comes to your small business, the first thing I want you to know is that you don't have to have minority status in order to go after it. There are people who are not registered with anything at all, and they go and they get these contracts. The minority status helps you get leverage, and it puts you in a set aside category so that, like I said, the government's obligated to give 23% of its business to small business, and then it's further obligated of that 23% to give at least 5% of that business to set aside communities. So what does that mean? That means if you're a woman-owned business, if you are a Black-owned business, if you are Native American, if you are a veteran, if you're in the hub zone, there's many different categories that fall within that set aside. And that's something that I want people to really understand. The second part of that is to make sure that you're really registered as a business. I know a lot of us might provide different services, or we might sell a t-shirt or do something once, and we're doing it as a sole proprietor. And a sole proprietor means any human being that has a social security number who receives money for a product or a service. You're automatically a sole proprietor. So what I believe is very important is that you take the time to register your business as a real business, whether that's an LLC, an S Corp, a C Corp, whatever you decide, but you have very little chance to get a government contract as a sole proprietor. Just registering properly will give you an advantage and help you to move forward.